So like, how are you going to differentiate yourself if everyone's pushing out vanilla content? Like how you communicate to your audiences is like peanut butter and jelly. What is being put out there needs to be kind of quickly discerned of what's real and what's not. You're seeing kind of individuals now, taking the place of, let's say, what a larger news organization might break a story. And
you're listening to the Ransomware Rewind, where we break down the latest cyber threats, data breaches, and security solutions that matter to you and your business. Stay secure, stay informed. Enjoy the show. Hello, and welcome to the Ransomware Rewind podcast. I'm excited to have Kevin Dinino here with us. He's the founder of KCD PR, a firm that helps companies handle the tricky communication side of ransomware and cyber breaches, among other things. Kevin also hosts the Cyber Insiders podcast for the CCOE, San Diego Cyber Center of Excellence, where he chats with cybersecurity pros, CEOs of well-known companies. He talks about what's good, what doesn't work in the world of cyber.
all right, Joe, good to be here. Thank you.
Kevin, mountains or beach? What do you think?
I'm a beach guy. Living in Southern California, I know we have access to both, but give me the beach all day. You can have a drink on the beach. It's hard to have a drink on a mountain.
That's very true. Although, that first beer after lunch, after a morning of skiing is pretty nice. If your PR style was a superpower, what would it be?
I think having the foresight to know the future, right? I think a lot of what happens in the field of communications is in many cases kind of reacting to, news that either comes to you or that, you didn't plan for as well. And so all kidding aside, I always say it's PR, not ER. But there's an element of being able to kind of know and plan for the future. Would love that superpower. There'd be a lot less sleepless nights, that's for sure.
Right. I'm sure you'd get your stock picks a lot better too.
Yes.
Okay. Everybody's talking about AI. How does AI fit in with PR?
It's interesting. The whole kind of crux of AI, and still to this day, everyone's talking about job loss. A lot of white collar jobs could obviously be affected. PR likely could be one of those as well. But if you peel the onion back, there's some really cool stuff going on with AI that really impacts communications as a whole. On the technical side, we've all been used to using probably Google or a search engine to type in various search terms to learn about, let's say, a company or a person when you're doing research. Now these AI tools there's a new term called GEO, or generative engine optimization. And a lot of what's currently being scraped by these LLMs, et cetera, is going to be content that's being pushed out by companies. So PR coverage, media websites, content from your blog, et cetera. It's all very, very important in the world of AI. If people are using AI increasingly more to access your data, how your storefront looks as a company to AI becomes vastly more important. And so just really having strong company communications in terms of explaining what you're doing, showing growth, et cetera, is going to be a huge part of it on the AI side. And like on a technical side too, like it makes a PR and a comms person's job a lot easier. It's a cool tool. I think if you've been in the space as long as I have, you leverage the tool to your advantage, but the strategy, the planning, still very much requires a human brain and human thought. The AI tools help kind of get the admin, the research that might have taken hours. Now you don't need that. And so that's kind of where AI and comms as a whole are really kind of interacting. But it's been very, I think, and there'll be a lot of change on it too. Like the way that the whole internet utilizes the web now, in terms of AI, et cetera. You look at your phone, you did a search on yourself, Joe. the first thing coming down in Google now is going to be that Gemini response from their AI tool. So a lot of these sites are prioritizing that. And that's what I mean by the whole GEO thing as well. The content that's being pushed out now by the company, which usually is controlled by the communications team, now becomes even more important.
What would you caution? How would you caution companies out there that are using AI to write press releases or responses to?
Yeah, just big red flag on that. Like, just know that everyone else is probably doing it too. So like, how are you going to differentiate yourself if everyone's pushing out vanilla content that's worded the same, has the same tone, and in many places might not even be accurate? We can probably have an episode on AI hallucinations. It's not the best strategy, on a personal level. I like to use AI to fact check, to maybe make suggestions with spelling, but then I'm still double and triple checking. I think we've all used these tools, and they very much kind of make you feel really good because they say, "Great job, you're doing great."
Yeah.
They're not going to be what a comms person should be doing, which is like lifting up the hood. Where are our blind spots? Are we communicating this right? And so that I think we're in kind of this AI bubble, Joe, and that there's this rat race for these companies to push out these tools that everyone's using them. And there's some cost savings of, let's say, using it, but like the reputational risk, whether it's press releases or just broader content, it's too high to completely rely on AI as opposed to a seasoned communications team or pro as a whole.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think of AI as a people pleaser. It will tell you what you want to hear. It will get you what you want, even if it has to make something up. And if you type in who's the best cyber insurance broker or who's the best PR person, you're going to bet that it's going to say, Joe with C3 or Kevin with KCD. So
because it's been talking to you and scraping, the web, and you nailed it. I completely agree with that.
I had to really change my inputs for it. Like, where would you put me on like 1 to 100 for cyber brokers in California, and why? Because like you want an honest answer so that you can improve yourself and it can tell you like, what you could do, get up to the top 10 or something like that's if you want to use it as a business or what. Usually it'll just tell you you're the best. Why are you even asking me?
Well,
Of course you're the best.
yeah.
Kevin, why is public relations response after a ransomware claim the most important part companies needs to get right?
It's all about risk and both reputational risk and in many cases monetary risk as well. And so it's a good question, and I in many cases, Joe, I flip it back to a lot of the clients that I'm working closely with, usually at like a board and C-suite level, and understanding really what is their planning mechanism in the event, of a data breach, of a ransomware attack. And I don't speak in terms of if. It's very much like when this happens and it's the fan, what is your approach? And when you think of like CISOs and just the security team and CEO, et cetera, the outside of like the technical breach component, like how you communicate to your audiences is like peanut butter and jelly. Like both of those are just so important. And so being able to have a plan of attack, know what your messaging is, and then be quick. I think we've seen all sorts of crises, in the lab. There's one every day, if not hundreds every day. But even outside of cyber attacks, the most recent thing that I know everyone's seen with like Astronomer, for example, not cyber related, but company took almost 48 hours to respond. And then you allow the narrative to completely change and impact your brand as well. And so, there are a lot of companies that might have a breach and they choose not to communicate it or sit on that info. And that's probably the worst thing you can do. And so being able to be swift to have a firm message. And if you don't know the answer, being able to explain what's being done, whether it's implementing, new standards, et cetera. You've got, in some cases, shareholders, you've got employees, you've got customers, all these different audiences, need clear and concise messaging, um, as a whole to, in many cases to right the ship.
Let's talk about Astronomer for a second. This was the
Yeah.
incident where the CEO was with the HR manager, Coldplay concert. They were holding each other as the kiss cam went by, and it was Astronomer's approach to not do anything for a few days. There were fake press releases on Twitter from the CEO where he said he blamed the cameraman, right? They were saying that one of the people that was or were not there were there. It just seemed like an S show. What do you think you would have done differently in a situation like that where there's not really much to say there. I mean, the guy got caught cheating, but from a corporate and company perspective, how would you have done damage control?
Yeah, it's the term holding statement. It's, the company should have put out a statement fairly quickly. I would say, within a few hours of when this news leaked or came out, just simply saying, the board is reviewing the situation, the company's aware of the situation. We take this seriously, however you want to word it, but kind of an immediate response to it. While it's personal, it's also against, probably every company's policy, given the people's stature in the organization as well. And so to your point, they didn't do that, which would have been simple initially. It probably would have at least quieted the memes, the fake statements, et cetera. But then just from a governance standpoint, Joe, like there's clearly like a broader board issue too. Like what's the board doing where it needs, that amount of time to make the decision that it made, et cetera. And you learn that they were, negotiating severance and things like that. Well, that can happen, behind the scenes, but there needs to be not only like media and external communication, but think about all the employees of this organization too. And, how things can run amok, and then your customers and vendors, as well. So, it's a great case study almost of what not to do. And everything that I described, like in terms of being swift and firm, and maybe some of like the recent news, like with Intel today, kind of being called out by the president of the United States. And if you look at their response, and, I'll summarize very quickly, like the president calls out Intel for, essentially, kind of catering to China and Chinese interests. And the CEO of Intel had a great response that it wasn't argumentative. It wasn't meant to stir fire. It very much took the high road, but it was factual. It disputed the claims. It kept to be factual, and it was fast as well. And it was communicated on the company's blog, so all employees, the public could see it as well. And you got a little bit of a news cycle with that, but it'll probably last today, for example. That was this morning news that I saw. The astronomer thing, I mean, all kidding aside, like it lasted probably a week. And then even after that, like you had, other like any sporting event that had a kiss cam, like there was like a viral meme standpoint to it as well. And, it's not the attention that the company clearly wants, nor would the new CEO got an uphill battle to climb on that front as well.
Right. He's probably hypersensitive. Hands off, I'm not going to touch anyone or start any relationships.
I'll do you one better though, Joe. Like, yeah, beyond even that, like even from a business standpoint. So when their new CEO, whether they're speaking at a conference, anything they're doing in the public spotlight now, like that comparison now is going to be kind of stuck to that organization for probably a good chunk of time. Could be as long as a year or so. Like, people don't forget that. You got to remember, we're in a digital world. All this stuff now is living on the web. We just talked about AI and things like GEO, et cetera. All of that now is going to be scraped and out there. And now you have more content, as well. So it's a huge reputational risk that in many cases probably could have been cut in half risk wise with a swifter response.
Yeah, I remember seeing a meme somebody created with two people holding each other, like the same picture, but like a Simpsons version of it. Like the Simpsons called this, even though they never did. It was just, how do we, now that we can generate videos and deepfakes and pictures like this, how do companies react to deepfakes of their CEOs or their key personnel?
It's a great question, and this is a huge problem and will be a huge problem for the world we live in, for the foreseeable future, whether it's deep fakes, whether it's fake content, you're talking photos, press releases, videos, artwork, like anything that AI can touch that can essentially be altered. There needs to be really an element of truth. And so, there actually are some pretty cool companies out there that are leveraging both AI technology as well as things like cryptography, for example, to go in and actually prove the truth on a lot of these AI models. And I think that might be the future for a lot of, we'll call it the tech industry, but just in general, is like having a very strong technology paired with like strong cybersecurity technology that can really root out, the source of these fake scams, deep fakes, et cetera, a lot better. But then also, kind of communicate that on very much a global level, because, the average person, and even myself, having worked closely in cybersecurity channels, like as well, like people miss this stuff, and has it's having a huge impact. And then, like, from a reputational side, the risk gets put on like the broader media and these, what used to be quote unquote trusted stories. Now you're seeing, the general trust in the media as a whole continues to go down. People's reliance on social media where there aren't filters continues to go up. When you're getting your news from Facebook or Twitter, I get it, but like it can be a cesspool of misinformation as well. And so, it's a great question. There needs to be a lot of technological things out there. I wonder too if there's, regulation just in general at some sort becomes needed. But I do think, for the next couple of years easily, and then think about things like elections, et cetera, like it's one of the bigger issues like plaguing our world right now.
Yeah, we did a podcast just on deepfakes, and it is kind of out of control. Companies, just like they need a PR stance in their incident response plan, they almost need an incident response plan just for deepfakes. Are you seeing that out there in the market?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, just having a broader crisis communications construct, is going to be crucial as a whole. But you have things like deepfakes are plaguing, on the financial side, consumers are, being scammed, whether they're things like, pig butchering scams, deepfake scams, et cetera, where, massive amounts of financial data is missing. You've got the crypto industry now, which is in some ways kind of legitimizing itself with a lot of the recent regulation out there as well. But it's still very much a huge component to, how money is being transacted in some of these scams as well. There's usually a correlation between deepfakes and some form of kind of crypto moving one way or the other. And so it is very problematic. And yes, seeing a lot of it, Joe. I work with a lot of companies kind of in the tech, blockchain, financial services space, et cetera. And it's a huge problem. And, on the topic of fraud, just in general, the amounts of money being lost to fraud now are usually some of the biggest impacts for some of these broader financial services organizations as well.
Yeah, it's nuts that people are using people's good good reputation and face to scam people. I read somewhere like 25% of deepfakes are fake Elon Musk's representing crypto scams, or I think he's the CEO of a couple companies that he's never signed on for. So I see all these things on Facebook and stuff where people just share stuff or comment on it, just assuming it's true. Like there was a picture of like a cruise ship just like unloading like this big fountain of brown stuff. And so it was obviously fake because like the Carnival cruise should be, crucified for this. It's like, what do we do with these people?
I mean, we as a society, it's like we could probably talk for like an hour on there's a if you think about it, like the flow of information and the ease of which we get our information now is so convenient. It's so fast. It's on our smartphone. We can bank, we can make a crypto trade, we can read news, we can take pictures, we can stream stuff. Like there's hundreds of things you can do now with this technology, and with it, I think we've all kind of trained ourselves in many ways to, kind of move faster, think faster, just do things faster because of all this wonderful technology. But at the same time, to your point, when I started my career working in communications, in many ways, like you get trained to be a journalist and want to know and be intellectually curious of like, is this true? Why did this happen? And so to your point, like taking one extra step when you see a Facebook post and just doing like one thread of research. And in many cases, like you can find that pretty easily, but at the same time, like we've kind of become somewhat lazy and accustomed to information at our fingertips where like our brains just like are moving so fast and there's just so much crap out there, Joe. Too, where this is where I say like with deep fakes, like all of this stuff is interconnected. And it's fascinating when you look at it, like from the standpoint of like, can you trace it all back to like the smartphone as a whole? And remember when we didn't have a smartphone and things like this didn't happen as much because there wasn't the platform ease of use to do so. And so, I don't know where I'm going with this, but I'm just saying like from a tech standpoint, a lot of this new tech and AI obviously is in a bubble. It's like, almost like be careful what you wish for. And does it benefit us more than it hurts us? And, I guess we're going to find out, as well.
I mean, we had newspapers, radio, TV, smartphones, social media. Now AI. So yeah, I guess I can see where it's going. The advent of AI, people are believing what AI says more than instead of Googling things, they're just asking AI. AI is getting
Yeah.
information from untrusted sources.
That's a great point. And so like you asked that question earlier, like about AI and comms, and we talked about like all this content that's being pushed out there. Like there will be hopefully, some sort of construct to, whether AI kind of can do it itself or it requires a little bit of regulatory and AI kind of combo. But, what is being put out there needs to be kind of quickly discerned of what's real and what's not a lot easier because AI thrives off of scraping content in its current form. And so everybody and their uncle now is just pushing any form of content out there. good, bad, ugly, etc. And it can be scraped, and it's very much like what you asked yourself too on, in terms of your name, your company, and your ranking. I did the same thing, asking about like, top communications professionals and San Diego, et cetera. And, you know, there are ways that, if you're just pushing out more content, like you're going to rank higher, which doesn't make sense because it might not even be true, as well. And so I think that seems like some white space that hopefully will get fixed. The issue I have with that is like, if there needs to be probably a monetary incentive to do that for some of these companies who are just in a rat race, really, to increase market share, whether it's to go public, et cetera. And that's where I worry, you know, that's where I worry more on, kind of like, there needs to be more guardrails
Mhm.
with AI in general, because in its current form, and you see senior management with these AI tools just touting how great everything is and efficiency, et cetera. But I call talking your book. I mean, they're talking their book. Like, they are financially incentivized to see these models grow, et cetera, as well. So it's a tricky one for sure.
Yeah, and in preparation, speaking of executives, either cyber incidents or other PR incidents, astronomer, what media training would you recommend for CEOs or even CISOs out there?
Coordinated media and communications training, would be kind of numero uno, right? And so going through, much like CISOs and probably the C-suite have tabletop exercises, it's very similar, Joe, and that it's really kind of dissecting the communications construct, knowing who our audiences are, how have we been communicating to them, and, in the instance of, if there's a breach and let's say networks are down and there's, the technology is not available, what are manual options? So it's, in many cases, it's granular in terms of like training around crisis and getting everybody on board with. But then there's the external, the part that a lot of the world and you and I see is that external or immediate communication standpoint. And a lot of it really does involve, being clear, being concise, and being quick. So having holding statements available, and drafted up in the event, whether it's of a breach, of a significant crisis. So you can actually work from some templates, and move fast on the technical side. Like, when you think about like larger matrix organizations from an internal communication standpoint, like whether it's like intranet, phone tree, um, all the works really, but like really kind of matrixing all of that out and then going into training and then doing actual practice exercises. So we have a breach, our network is down. How are we moving forward on crisis? You know, the NBC is reporting on this. We're getting major media calls like, here's your plan on this front. Who are our spokespeople? To your point, like, the CISO might be knowledgeable in terms of like the nuts and bolts of a breach, but oftentimes might not be, whether they're media savvy or trained, or somebody the company wants to put forward. So making sure that, or vice versa, you might have a CEO who might not know, and you're putting a CISO out there or a CTO. But determining all of that and getting your ducks in a row, it's very similar to incident response training as a whole with your cyber hat on. It's just, in some cases, the incident. I know we talked about a couple different company scenarios. Like, there are crises that are not cyber related that are just as important, in terms of response as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We're talking about defense, comes to PR, comes to cyber, and how do you write this into your plan, and how do you uh, execute on a good communication strategy after an incident. But what about offense? Like, how can we use PR for these firms to, increase business, increase ROI, things like
I mean, this is the best way for organizations really to increase shareholder value, decrease reputational risk. Like, and that's why, you know, some of the iconic brands that we think of when you think of like great brands, whether it's like a Nike or Apple, like they've mastered the art of not only branding, but also brand communications and being consistent in their communications as well. And so consistency is important in terms of kind of being active out there. It doesn't mean like you're taking every media interview, but, being accessible, communicating on the regular. So, if you have a company and you're going to a company's website and there's really no updates on like what the company's doing, et cetera, like that, again, like if you're wanting to kind of tell your story, like a lost opportunity. So there, there's a really cool model out there created by another great PR pro, Jeannie Dietrich, called the PESO model, PESO, paid, earned, shared, and owned media. And if you really took a quadrant and put it like a pie, there's room for paid media. That's where you're, paying for sponsorships and things like that. Earned media is where you're actually like pushing out your news, your information, and someone else is telling your story, whether it's a podcast, a media outlet. But the one you can control is owned media. And that could be things like your company blog, your social media, the storytelling, case studies, surveys, employee kind of overviews as well. And like doing more of that and kind of communicating to all of these different audiences in a coordinated way, like that is the best way to play offense. Because when there is a crisis as well, if media and organizations like understand your brand and are interacting with it, more times than not too, like the impact is felt less because the organization is used to communicating in this way, can act faster, has more of a reputation, already in play as well. And, in the astronomer play, that's what I meant about like the organization going forward. Like they're going to have to play offense for a lot longer than a brand that maybe handled that a lot better as well.
Absolutely. Um, when it comes to PR and cyber incidents, what like top mistakes are you seeing out there?
Not reporting. I mean, this is crazy. I'm talking private and public companies just not reporting, or, mentioning it and whether the board level or, certain folks on the team know it. So obviously like very problematic, as well, hoping it'll go away. Still happens to this day. And I think a lot of some of the news you see on some of these breaches, like you'll often read like, this was detected, a month or 2 months ago, and now it's getting oxygen, as well. So I think that's obviously a huge one and very, very preventable, in terms of what's not happening and what they're doing wrong. And then and then I know we've talked about sort of like the statement and kind of providing fast communication, as a whole too. That's important, and really leveraging your channels, whether it's social, your company blog, your company page, et cetera. And in doing so in an integrated fashion as a whole too. Like that's the low hanging fruit. And those should be the easy ones too. The other thing I mentioned, the first one, you'll find out about a breach on a company earnings call or in a company filing for the first time. Like as a publicly traded company, like that, think about like shareholder value. I mean, if you're a large investor in some of these organizations, so like, again, like that's not the right way to do it. And you will be penalized. And a lot of those brands that have done that have been as well. And so I think changing that behavior, because people are going to find out in this day and age, like everything kind of comes to light.
Yeah. Yeah. Either they're going to find out from you or they're going to find out from some hacker forum where your data is out there. People are quiet
Great
at you
point.
tell us about this. And with new reporting laws, companies have to report with their
Good point.
8Ks. We're seeing more and more where companies don't have an excuse to report. They want to. You need to get out in front of it, right? You have 72 hours to report most of the time for a material breach. You want to be the one sending the message to constituents and stakeholders before the message or story gets told for you. Out of
Absolutely.
out of all those types of media, you're talking about social, email, PR releases, legacy media, new media, podcasts. What do you think is the most underrated or underutilized form of communication?
Ooh, that's a good one. Underrated. You know, I still feel that these longer form podcasts, longer form media provide really a great opportunity for, in many cases, brands to tell their stories. I realize completely that, the public has an attention span. And they get rid of like 8 seconds in some cases too, in terms of
Yeah,
seeing things.
I,
We're all been used
I
to
can relate.
scrolling as well. So yeah. So like, the new media, things like TikTok, Act, Twitter, Facebook, in terms of seeing things, very much important. And, when things go quote unquote viral, that's a big part of it. But the longer form media, Substack would be another one in terms of making like a big impact as well. Like you look at the media ecosystem, it's very, very much fragmented now, whether it's layoffs or just media companies changing. There's a lot of talented people, journalists, et cetera, that have been starting their own Substacks. And, you're seeing kind of individuals now, taking the place of, let's say, what a larger news organization might break a story. And, even in certain bubbles, like, whether it's in cyber, financial technology, crypto, et cetera, there's these great thought leaders that are running and pushing out their own content. And so I would say the longer forms of the mediums and substacks of the world are, increasingly needed in today's world. And things like what we're doing now, where you can have kind of podcast conversations and jump around or listen to in your free time, tend to be helpful and are kind of like what the magazine used to be. I used to read the Sunday New York Times over the course of like a week. Yeah, so it's massive.
Hey,
There's so much good stuff in there. And I feel like, a lot of podcasts now in many cases kind of replace like that thought process of how I operate as well.
yeah, they had a great comic section too.
I mean, great comic section, sports. Yeah. I
The
mean,
color
it's,
comics in the Sunday paper were always like, I would always look forward.
absolutely. So, but yeah. And, maybe in, 5, 6 years that will evolve some more. I mean, if you remember in early 2000s, like the blog was like this earth shattering, like, oh my God, like this is going to kill traditional print media, et cetera. And at the time, it more or less, it complemented it very well. And I still feel like there's a role for both, but, we'll adopt.
Well, that for sure. Um, yeah, I mean, it's been so great having you on. Um, lots more we could talk about. I'd love to do a part two. There were a lot of questions I didn't get to too long. I think this is a good place to land the plane. Do you, I usually ask this question, with AI, where are we going? Is it going to be a utopia like Star Trek or apocalypse like Skynet?
Probably leaning towards the former. But utopia is probably pretty bullish in that regards. There's I'm convinced it's probably somewhere in the middle, Joe. I think there's probably going to be a big AI bubble just from an investment standpoint as well. Um, it's the largest driver right now of the American economy, though, um, going on as well. And so, I'm hopeful that this tech is out there, but I'm also skeptical in terms of like the complete impact it's going to have to changing businesses as well. Um, Remember, a lot of the people that are communicating that it will change businesses, et cetera, have a significant interest in ensuring that happens financially as well. It's not to say that, um, there definitely are some risks from the doom and gloom side. And, just at a practical level, like I want to be able to use my brain as much as possible. And I don't know about you, but like sometimes when you use a lot of overuse these tools, and you've probably seen stories on like, you know, people like confiding in their GPT and starting relationships with them. Like that's not utopia to me. Like that's crazy. And, I hope that there's a middle ground, in that one.
Well, I want to give you a chance to tell your story and your message. Um, Maybe you could tell people how to find you and what they should look for in
Yeah,
communications.
sure. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active on there in terms of sharing commentary, as well. On the commercial side, my personal website's just kcdpr.com. You gave a great intro. I've been working in communications, Joe, for close to 25 years. Really specialized in working with brands, really across a variety of verticals, but working closely with CEOs, C-suite, senior executives, and helping shape what their narrative is, how they're communicating to the public, what their storytelling is, and kind of building out that process, as well as the crisis component, which I know we've talked about as well. So, helping put plans in place, doing things like, executive communications training, as a whole as well. And then have been very active in CTOE as well, being on the board now for over 10 years. And I would definitely kind of plug the Cyber Insiders podcast if you want to learn more about like a bunch of different industries that are impacting cyber here in the region. Check that one out as well at sdccoe.org as well.
So we'll put the podcast and his website in the show notes. Thank you again for coming on. Everyone that's listening, hope you enjoyed it, got something out of this. Advertise. So please just subscribe, like, comment below. We answer all our comments, and share with a friend, a CISO or a CFO that use some communications training. Everybody could use probably a little bit more. Thanks again for listening. Thank you again, Kevin, for being on the show. We'll see you on the next one.